Okay? So we're going to start before you're even have leprosy, okay? You're just a member of the community in first century Judaism. You have a family, you have a job, you get up every day, you go to work, you have friends and neighbors, you go to the temple to worship God, you're a part of the community. And one day, you notice a little weird patch of skin on your body. Some of us can relate to that experience where it's like, oh, what is that, But you don't think anything of it, Sometimes we get weird blemishes and things like that. And it's just a little spot. That's a little bit numb and a little bit pale, and you don't think anything of it. You just go about your day. But over time, the patch of skin that looks kind of weird is starting to grow, and you're starting to notice that you don't have any feeling in that growing patch of skin, and that other patches are starting to appear elsewhere in your body, and you're starting to get a little concerned. And you know that under Jewish law, whenever something like this happens, you're supposed to go show yourself to the priest, and they're supposed to examine you and find out what's going on. And so you go to the priest, and you feel the same kind of nervousness that we might feel today going to the doctor and not knowing what we're going to hear. That's a scary sort of uncertainty that we feel. And you go to the priest, and the priest looks at the skin and determines that you have leprosy and pronounces you unclean. And that means that all of a sudden you are considered a danger to your community, to the people around you, and that you have to be separated from your family, from your neighbors, from your community, because in addition to being physically contagious and dangerous to the people around you, there's a thought that you might be morally unfit to be part of this community, that maybe this leprosy is actually judgment from God because of something that you've done. But in any case, even just having leprosy, even if you haven't done anything wrong, it makes you unfit to enter God's presence. It makes you unfit to be at the center of this community where God's presence is. And so immediately you have to leave. You have to leave your family. You can't hug your kids and your spouse before you go. You have to leave your neighbors and your job. No longer can you go into the temple and be close to God. So you leave. You walk out of the community, and you have to figure out how to live and how to survive on your own. And you get out there and you begin to live outside the city. And there are other lepers there, and you sort of befriend some of them. And you don't have shelter. You don't have any way of earning an income. You depend on the mercy of other people passing by to leave you food or water. And over time, your condition just gets worse and worse. Your skin, the patches continue to grow, and your skin becomes numb. You start to smell bad because parts of your body are literally just rotting. You might even lose a finger or a toe. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And your capacity to feel any sort of hope that things are going to get better just declines. When people walk by you, they're afraid. Parents cover their kids' eyes. They try to stay as far away from you as possible. When you see somebody, you have to shout out, "Unclean, unclean," and declare to them to stay away. And then, even outside the city, news starts to spread about this traveling rabbi who's been doing these miraculous healings. And you think, oh, I wonder what that's about. And then you hear about some of the miraculous things that have been happening. He's healing blind people, lame people are walking, and you think, maybe there is somebody, maybe there is hope. Maybe there is somebody who can make this right. And then you can hardly believe it, but Jesus actually comes walking through the area where you live. You and the other lepers, you cry out to Jesus. And instead of just crying out, unclean, unclean, you're crying out, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Have mercy on us. And instead of shying away, instead of looking disgusted, he just looks at you and he says, go show yourself to the priests. And this isn't the response that you're expecting. You're not sure what you're expecting, but go show yourself to the priests is all he says. And you're a little bit confused because in Jewish custom, showing yourself to the priest is what you're supposed to do after you're cleansed of leprosy. Like if Jesus were to heal you, the first thing that you would do is you'd go show yourself to the priest so that they could officially welcome you back into the community. So that they could certify, yes, this person has been made clean. They can now go through this long process of being spiritually cleansed and welcomed back into the community. But you're looking down at your hands and your body and your leprosy is still there. And Jesus said to go show yourself to the priest. And so you just go. You don't question it. You don't think, but Jesus, you just trust and obey Jesus. Before anything has changed, you just do what Jesus said to do. And as you go and as the other lepers go, you feel this sensation in your body. And all of a sudden, parts of your body that haven't felt anything in a long time, all of a sudden, you start to feel again. And you look down at your skin and the patches are gone. And your skin is healthy and clear and clean. And you're overwhelmed with joy. Because this doesn't just mean that your physical suffering is over. This means that you get to be welcomed back in to the community. You get to see your spouse and your kids again. You get to go back to work. You never thought you'd be excited to go back to work, but you're thrilled. You get to be back in the presence of God. You get to be back in the community. And so you run. You begin to run towards the temple to show yourself to the priests, and the other lepers are running alongside you, except for one of them. And out of the corner of your eye, you see that one of your group has turned around. And you look back to see he's running the other direction. And you think, that's really weird. Where is he going? What's he doing? But you don't even have time to think about that, to question that. You just keep running in the direction of the temple. And so to find out what the deal was with that other leper, we've got to look at this passage and find out what's going on. All right? So we're in Luke chapter 17. Again, this is page 124 if you're in one of the journaling Bibles. And here's what it says. It says, on the way to Jerusalem, this is Jesus, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voice saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. When he saw them, he said to them, go and show yourself to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, he turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. All right, so what can we learn from this interaction that Jesus has? What can we learn about Jesus? What can we learn about his kingdom? What can we learn about what it means for us to be part of that kingdom? The first thing I want us to explore is that in this encounter we see a theme that appears throughout the Gospels, which is that the coming of God's kingdom is good news to the poor. The coming of God's kingdom is good news to those people who are outcasts. It's good news to everybody, but it's especially good news to the poor and to the outcasts, to the people who feel like they don't belong, to the people who have been excluded and sort of pushed out to the margins of society. Look at a couple details of this story. At the very beginning, Luke wants us to know that this story took place between Samaria and Galilee, and that it took place as Jesus was entering a village. So we know that Samaria and Galilee did not get along. Samaritans and the Jewish people had very different views about what it meant to worship God, and they didn't like each other. There was a lot of tension there. And so to be in this place between Samaria and Galilee was like the outcast place for both of these communities. And this happened as Jesus was entering a village. So we know that this is a place where people are marginalized and left out. This is where you go when you don't belong. And original readers may have even known what it was like to walk through this area. They may have known what it was like to walk past a group of lepers and to feel the sense of discomfort, the sense of fear, and the sense of just sort of like maybe sympathy, but powerless sympathy. And they would have had a reaction in their mind that would have been normal and appropriate. Keeping their distance, keep looking the other way. And Jesus' reaction would have been very different from that. And we see this theme, not just in this encounter, but throughout Luke's gospel. So I want us to kind of visit some other points throughout Luke's gospel to kind of see that this story is in a repeating pattern in Luke's storytelling. So we're going to go way back to the very beginning of Luke chapter 1, when the angel comes to Mary and tells Mary that Jesus is going to be born. And in Mary's response, she says something really interesting that doesn't get featured in a lot of like Christmas story kind of stuff. Here's what she says in Luke 1:52. She says, "He has brought down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of humble estate." So the angel says, hey, you're going to have a baby named Jesus. He's going to be the Messiah. He's going to be the king of God's kingdom. He's going to be the Savior. And she says, surely God has brought down mighty people from their thrones, and he has lifted up the lowly. In Luke chapter 4, when Jesus goes to the temple and he's teaching there, it says this in Luke chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. "And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him, and he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, 'The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed.'" And then the last one that we'll look at is in Luke chapter 6, verse 20. "Jesus lifted up his eyes on his disciples, and he said to them, 'Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God.'" And now in this encounter, we see Jesus demonstrating this dynamic. He is reaching out to the most marginalized, the most outcast, the most lowly of his day, and he is welcoming them in and making them a part of God's kingdom. He's demonstrating this this aspect of his mission to proclaim good news to the poor, to demonstrate good news to the poor, to tell them something about God's kingdom that is especially good to them. Why? Why is the coming of God's kingdom such good news to the poor, to the outcast, to the marginalized? It's because in earthly kingdoms, people use power for their own benefit. And those without power are marginalized. They're pushed to the outside. But in God's kingdom, people use power to serve others, and the powerless are embraced. So here's essentially what this means, is that in every earthly kingdom, because people have a tendency to be selfish, to look out for ourselves, if you don't have the power to look out for yourself, you're just out of luck. But Jesus comes along and he says, hey, there's a different kind of kingdom that you can be a part of for the very first time. Because it doesn't matter where you go on planet Earth, every single human kingdom is the same.